Okay, in this video, I'm going to show you how to make a relative frequency chart and a relative frequency histogram in Excel. The data that you see on the screen, this comes from your textbook. This is problem number 8 on page 85. You can see this is the age of death for the English and British monarchs since 1066. Okay. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make our relative frequency distribution chart, and then we're going to use that to make our relative frequency histogram. Okay, so what we want to do is we're going to come up here and we're going to highlight the title of our data right here. And then I am going to go to Insert, and I am going to insert a pivot table. And you can see it goes ahead and it selects all the data for me. And I'm just going to put this on our current worksheet. I'm not going to put it on a new one, but you do have the option to put it on a new one. And it's asking me where I want it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come in here and I am going to left click and hold and drag this so that it makes me a nice big chart. And then I'm going to click OK. And then we have this going on. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to tell Excel where to put my data in this chart. Now, the only thing we have for our data is the age of death for the English and British monarchs. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to drag it down here to the rows. And I'm also going to grab it and I'm going to drag it down here to the sum values, to the sigma values. And it gives me this nice giant chart right here. That's okay. We're actually going to make this a little bit smaller because right now all it's doing is you can see it's just writing the same thing that was over here. It looks like maybe we've got 2 of these 56s in our chart there. Okay. Let's go over here onto the side and, sorry, wrong side. We're going to come over here. And we're going to click on this side. Actually, I'm going to right click on it. And I am going to summarize these values by count. And what that does is it tells me how many of each of those different ages that I actually have in my data set. So you can see we've got one 12-year-old, one 15-year-old, one 28-year-old. If we come down here, we've got, looks like 2 40-year-olds and 3 49-year-olds and so on and so on. Okay, so now what I have is a frequency distribution. Now, there's a whole lot of data here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here on the left. I'm going to right click on the data that's over here, and I'm going to group my data. Okay, now Excel will automatically default to the minimum and to the maximum there. So 12 was our minimum age, 81 is going to be our maximum age. And it's going to ask me, where I would like to start, where I would like to stop, and then by how big do we want our class size to be. Well, I want my class sizes, or I want to have 8 classes. I don't know what I want my class size to be, but I do know I want 8 classes. So here's what I'm going to do. All right, now I need to cancel out of here for just a second, because now I know my minimum max. I'm going to take my maximum, and I'm going to subtract my minimum here. Oops, I forgot to put my equals in there. Sorry, because I was telling Excel that I actually want to subtract these. All right, that gives me 69. Okay, now 69 is the range for my data. And what I want to do is I want to break the 69 into 8 groups. So the next thing I'm going to tell Excel to do is divide that 69 by 8. And it gives me 8.625. So what this tells me is that I want to have a class size of 8. If it was 9.321, then my class size would be 9. If it was 5.243, then I would want my class size to be 5. Okay, and now I'm just going to erase this because I really don't need this information any longer. And I'm going to come back over here and right click. Oops, I just left clicked on that. I'm going to right click. We're going to group this data. And remember, I want to have my data in groups of 8. and we'll click OK. And you'll notice my chart has gotten a lot smaller now. And in fact, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I do have 8 classes now. So this is exactly what I wanted to happen. Okay. All right. Now, this is my frequency distribution. Remember, I wanted to do relative frequency. Okay. So we're going to have to come back over here and we're going to right click on this data because I want to show these values as a percent. And remember, your relative frequency is a percent of the total. So we're coming over here and we're looking for a percent of that column total. And now Excel has converted everything, but it's converted everything to a percent. Remember, our relative frequency is reported as a decimal. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here. I'm going to left click and hold, and I'm going to highlight all these percentages. I'm going to right click and go down here to Format Cells, and I'm going to turn these percents into decimals. Now over here under the category, I'm going to number, and then right now everything's rounded to 2 decimal places, but I'm just going to round everything to 3 decimal places and click OK. And now you can see I have a relative frequency distribution table, or relative frequency distribution, or relative frequency distribution chart. You can call it whatever you want to. And it has all of my relative frequencies over here to the side, and Excel even goes ahead and makes sure that everything adds up to 100% like it's supposed to. Okay, so that's how we get our relative frequency distribution. Now, if we want to make this into a histogram, then I'm going to come over here to Insert, and this time I am going to insert a pivot chart. Now remember, I just did the pivot table a minute ago, so now I'm going to insert a pivot chart. And I'm going to grab that pivot chart there. Okay, make sure that you have clicked somewhere inside your pivot table there. Then when you come up here to the pivot chart, you can see we've got all the different kinds of bar graphs up here. The first one is what we want, but the clustered column you see has already been highlighted. So I'm just going to go ahead and click OK. And this is what Excel is giving me. Now, this is not a histogram, because remember, your histogram, the bars are supposed to be touching, and these are not touching one another. Okay, so what we're going to have to do is we're going to come in here, and I am going to right-click on one of these columns of data, and down here on the bottom it says Format the Data Series. I'm going to choose that. Notice it gives me another menu over here on the side. And what we're going to do is we're going to come down here to the bottom, the gap width. This is at 219%. I want it to be at 0. So I'm going to back this all the way up until we're at 0%. And notice what it did to my table. I'm going to close, there we go. And now it's actually made me a histogram, but it's a little bit difficult to read. And so I'm going to come in here, I'm going to right click on this again. And you'll notice down here you fill and your outline. I'm going to outline. I'm just going to outline these rectangles in black, but you can do it in any color you want to. And what that does for you is it actually makes it easier to see the different rectangles in your histogram there. Sorry, this stuff keeps getting in the way. Okay, so all that's left to do is to put a title in there. And let me get this out of here. This is the age of death. Okay, and then we can put some axes in here. We do want to put in axis titles. All right, over here on the side, this is the relative frequency. And I'm just going to erase all of this right here. And then across the bottom here, these are on classes. And then one other thing that we like to do is we like to actually put the relative frequencies in there. We like to put the data on top of the bars there. And so I'm going to be clicking on the data labels right here. And now you'll notice it has actually included the relative frequencies in my chart. And this made my chart a little bit easier to read. And that's all there is to it. That's how you make a relative frequency distribution chart and a relative frequency histogram in Excel.